In the heart of a sprawling intergalactic hub, the pet shelter bustled with life. Creatures from every corner of the galaxy were crammed into cages, their colors, sizes, and shapes as varied as the stars. Shimmering feathers, scales, and fur flashed under the artificial lighting. Some of the more popular creatures were being snatched up by excited buyers: tall, insected aliens with quick movements, reptilian beings with hard scales, and others too strange to categorize. But in one dark corner of the shelter, there was an unusual silence, broken only by whispers of disapproval. The Scrixin sat alone, motionless. It was an exotic creature, slender, with soft bioluminescent skin that pulsed gently in hues of blue and purple, as if reflecting its mood. Its large, expressive eyes scanned the room, almost pleading, but no one approached. The occasional passerby would glance its way, only to recoil or mutter in their native tongue about its reputation. Too high maintenance, one merchant scoffed. Another alien, whose thin tendrils twitched nervously, murmured, emotionally volatile, dangerous. The Scrixin was not a creature anyone wanted. Once revered for its beauty and rarity, it had become a forgotten species. Its most distinctive feature, the need for a deep emotional connection, had turned it into a burden. Alien owners, who valued efficiency and independence, found the creature too needy, its psychic link to its owner too draining. As a result, the Scrixin had been abandoned time and time again, left to fade into obscurity in this neglected corner of the galaxy. But things weren't always this way. In its prime, the Scrixin had been a prized companion, known for its intelligence and ability to form deep, empathic bonds with its owners. That same intelligence made it sensitive, too sensitive for most species who lacked the patience or desire to maintain the emotional care it required. Over time, they had deemed the creature too much work. And so, the once beloved pet had been discarded, relegated to shelters like this one, with little hope of finding a home. A group of humans entered the shelter, cutting through the noisy chatter and sharp smells. Unlike the other species, they didn't rush to the more vibrant or impressive creatures on display. Instead, they wandered with a kind of curiosity, taking their time. They were explorers, travelers, perhaps even colonists seeking something more than just the typical pet. One of them, a young woman, stopped in front of the Scrixin's cage. Her eyes softened as she took in the sight of the lonely creature. She felt something indescribable, tug at her heart. The Scrixin met her gaze, its eyes wide, and for a moment, there was a connection. Not just curiosity, but something deeper. The Scrixin's bioluminescent skin brightened faintly, as if it had sensed her empathy. She knelt down, her hand pressing against the transparent barrier between them. The Scrixin responded in kind, placing a slender limb where her hand was. It was a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. For the first time in what felt like forever, the Scrixin wasn't being looked at like a burden or a problem. There was something in this human's eyes, compassion, a willingness to understand. "Are you sure about this?" A shelter worker approached, their voice filled with skepticism. "That thing, it's not like the others. It's emotionally complicated. Most can't handle it." The young woman glanced at the Scrixin again, its eyes reflecting a deep sadness but also a glimmer of hope. She could feel it, a quiet plea for companionship, for someone who wouldn't give up on it. "I'm sure," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "I think it just needs a chance." The shelter worker raised an eyebrow, clearly doubtful. "I've seen dozens of species try and fail. You humans, you're different, but this isn't just some pet." "I know," she replied, standing tall. "But that's why we'll take it." And with that, the decision was made. The humans, in their unique way, had looked past the fear and rejection that every other species had shown. They saw the potential in the Scrixin, not as a burden, but as a living being worthy of care and understanding. At first, the Scrixin seemed lost in its new environment. The humans had done their best to create a comfortable space, but the creature was restless, pacing and often refusing food. Its bioluminescence flickered erratically, a clear sign of its emotional turmoil. The young woman who had taken it in tried to offer comfort, but the Scrixin kept its distance. It wasn't hostility, It was fear, uncertainty. It had been abandoned before, and trust was something that had to be earned. Each day, she sat near it, speaking softly, not expecting much in return. She could sense the Scrixen's unease, but she never pushed too hard. Other species would have given up by now. She knew this. She'd heard the whispers, the mocking comments from alien neighbors. Humans always think they can fix everything. But she wasn't trying to fix the Scrixen. She simply wanted to understand it. Time passed, and slowly, things began to change. It started small, a shift in the Scrixen's eyes, a faint glow when she approached. One evening, as she sat reading nearby, the Scrixen edged closer. It still kept its distance, but its presence felt less guarded. The walls it had built were coming down, brick by brick, as if sensing that this human wasn't like the others who had abandoned it. As their bond deepened, the Scrixen began revealing more of itself. It wasn't just intelligent, it was astonishingly aware. There were moments when it seemed to anticipate the woman's emotions before she even expressed them. If she was anxious, the Scrixen would grow restless too, its bioluminescence dimming. But when she felt calm, its colors softened, reflecting a quiet harmony. The connection was more than just companionship. It was as if their emotions were intertwined. One evening, something extraordinary happened. As the woman reached for a glass of water across the room, it suddenly slid toward her. She froze, her eyes darting to the Scrixen. Its gaze was locked on the glass, its body still, but the air around them seemed to pulse with energy. The glass moved again, this time slower, as if testing its own abilities. The Scrixen wasn't just empathetic, it had developed a form of telekinesis, subtly manipulating objects in response to her needs. She approached it cautiously, kneeling beside it. "You're trying to help me, aren't you?" she whispered. The Scrixen looked up at her, its eyes bright and filled with something like recognition. There was no doubt now. This wasn't just a pet. This was an intelligent being, capable of deep understanding. It could sense her thoughts, her emotions, and it was responding in ways that no one had expected. Days passed, and their bond grew stronger. The Scrixen would often approach her without hesitation, staying close as if it had found safety in her presence. It began displaying small acts of loyalty, like nudging her toward rest when she seemed tired or calming itself when it sensed her frustration. She, in turn, grew more attuned to its needs, learning to read its emotional shifts by the patterns of its bioluminescence. What others had dismissed as erratic behavior was simply the creature's way of communicating, of showing a level of intelligence that went far beyond a typical pet. But then, something changed. The Scrixen's calm demeanor began to crack, replaced by a growing anxiety. Its bioluminescence flickered more frequently, and it would send sharp, sudden bursts of distress through their bond. The woman didn't understand at first. It wasn't fear of abandonment anymore. It was something else, something bigger. The Scrixen started projecting vivid, unsettling images into her mind, scenes of darkness spreading across the stars, of worlds falling silent. These weren't just random flashes. They were warnings, messages of something looming on the horizon. The creature would tremble, its light dimming as if it could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on it. She tried to soothe it, but the visions persisted. "What are you trying to show me?" she asked softly, but the Scrixen could only respond with more flashes of destruction. There was a connection here, she realized, something the Scrixen sensed, something that could affect not just their small corner of the universe, but the galaxy as a whole. And though she didn't fully understand it yet, she knew one thing for certain: the Scrixen wasn't just an abandoned pet. It was key to something much larger, something that others had overlooked. The Scrixen's distress became impossible to ignore. Its bioluminescence flared in erratic, violent pulses, and the psychic images it projected into the protagonist's mind grew sharper, more vivid. Gone were the subtle warnings of planetary desolation. Now, the visions were filled with chaos. Entire worlds burned under a shadow, star systems flickered out of existence, and vast fleets of unfamiliar ships moved silently across the void. Each vision left the Scrixen trembling, its wide, terrified eyes pleading for the human to understand. The protagonist, having grown fully attuned to the creature's emotional waves, realized these weren't random nightmares. They were warnings. The Scrixin was trying to communicate something beyond its own survival. It could sense a larger threat, one that had already begun to move through the galaxy. The humans, unlike other species, took these signs seriously. They trusted the bond they'd formed with the Scrixin and knew its distress was rooted in something real, something imminent. Determined to find answers, the protagonist began investigating, using the Scrixin's psychic abilities as a guide. Whenever the creature projected a vision, the human carefully pieced together what they could: locations, ships, faces, all fragments of a much larger puzzle. They combed through star maps, correlating the images with real places in the galaxy, places where communications had recently gone dark or species had vanished without explanation. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling the discoveries became. There were whispers of entire populations being wiped out, small, lesser-known species vanishing without a trace. No one had noticed at first. These were the quiet, insignificant corners of the galaxy, where trade routes rarely passed and where the more dominant species had little interest. But the Scrixin, with its empathic sensitivity, had picked up on it all. It could sense the pain, the fear, the loss rippling across light years. Eventually, a pattern emerged, pointing to a powerful faction of alien races working in the shadows. They sought to cleanse the galaxy of what they deemed lesser species, starting with the ones who posed the least threat. The Scrixin-esque kind had been one of their first targets, their emotional complexity making them an easy mark. But the plot didn't stop there. It was expanding, targeting dozens of species across the galaxy, any race that was deemed too weak, too insignificant to defend itself. And now, the Scrixin was living proof that this dark conspiracy was real. Driven by these revelations, the humans pushed forward, determined to expose the threat. Their investigation led them to a transmission, a secret communique intercepted from the faction. It confirmed their worst fears. The message detailed the next phase of the plot, a coordinated strike against multiple planets where lesser-known species resided. It wasn't just a genocidal campaign, it was systematic, strategic. The faction was playing the long game, ensuring that no one would notice the extermination of the galaxy's most vulnerable until it was too late. The final piece of evidence came when they encountered one of the faction's agents. A confrontation occurred, and the truth was laid bare. The faction had underestimated humanity, just as they had underestimated the Scrixin. They couldn't understand the bond between human and alien, the unique way in which humans had unlocked the Scrixin's potential. The agent sneered, dismissing the humans as soft-hearted, unworthy of the galaxy's greater power struggles. But it was clear that the bond between human and Scrixin was the very thing that had exposed their plan. The humans and the Scrixin realized they had to act fast. The conspiracy was already in motion, and time was running out for the species targeted next. They couldn't rely on the larger galactic powers to help. Those factions were too concerned with their own interests to care about the smaller races. It was up to them, a group of humans and their empathic companion, to stop the darkness from spreading. What had started as an adoption of an abandoned pet had turned into something much larger. The bond between the protagonist and the Scrixin was no longer just a personal connection, it had become a critical force in resisting the looming threat. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the soul of the galaxy, where compassion and understanding, embodied by humanity's unique willingness to care, might be the only hope to turn the tide. The humans, led by the protagonist, knew they couldn't stop the impending galactic extermination alone. With the Scrixin by their side, they began reaching out to other species marked for elimination. The task was daunting. Many of these races were scattered, isolated, and understandably distrustful. The humans were met with skepticism, with some species questioning why they should trust outsiders to fight their battles. After all, they had survived by staying hidden, avoiding conflict, and blending into the background. But the humans were persistent. The protagonist showed them the Scrixin, demonstrating the deep connection they had formed. This once abandoned creature, now a loyal ally, was living proof that the humans weren't just looking to help themselves. they genuinely cared about the survival of others. The Scrixen's psychic abilities allowed them to project visions of the threat, sharing the warnings directly with other species in ways words never could. Slowly, one by one, they began to listen. A small but determined alliance began to form, made up of outcasts and lesser-known species. Each group brought its own unique abilities to the table: biological adaptations, advanced technologies, or hidden knowledge passed down through generations. What united them was the humans' unwavering compassion and willingness to fight for the underdog. The Scrixen, once shunned, now became a beacon of hope, its emotional strength inspiring others to join the cause. As the final confrontation loomed, the humans and their allies gathered, knowing they were vastly outnumbered by the powerful faction orchestrating the extermination. But they had something the enemy lacked: a sense of unity forged through trust and shared purpose. The Scrixen played a crucial role, using its empathic abilities to detect shifts in the enemy's emotions, revealing weaknesses in their strategy, and sowing confusion among their ranks. The humans, led by the protagonist, seized every opportunity, coordinating their allies with tactical precision. The battle was fierce, but the humans' determination never wavered. As the alien faction's forces closed in, the Scrixen unleashed a wave of psychic disruption, incapacitating key enemy commanders by amplifying their fear and doubt. This momentary advantage allowed the humans and their allies to strike at the heart of the enemy's defenses. The protagonist and the Scrixen shared a powerful, unspoken connection during the fight, their emotions intertwined as they pushed forward, united in purpose. The enemy, so certain of their superiority, had underestimated the strength of the bond between human and Scrixen. What they saw as a weakness, empathy, compassion, turned out to be their undoing. The human's ability to form deep connections, to rally others through understanding and care, became the decisive factor in turning the tide of the battle. When the smoke cleared, the conspiracy lay in ruins. The alien faction, once poised to wipe out entire species, had been defeated. Those species, once considered insignificant, were now free, their survival secured through an unlikely coalition led by humans and the Scrixen. In the aftermath, the Scrixen species was no longer seen as a burden, but as an intelligent, empathic race that had played a vital role in saving the galaxy's most vulnerable. The protagonist and the Scrixen remained together, their bond stronger than ever. Their story, shared across star systems, became a symbol of how humanity's empathy and courage could unite even the most divided of species. It wasn't just a victory against an alien threat, it was a testament to what made humanity exceptional in the galaxy. Where others saw weakness, humanity saw strength. Where others abandoned, humanity embraced. The future, though uncertain, now held the promise of hope.